Ladies and gents, welcome back for episode 18. We've got the marvelous Freetrade with us, and actually, this is something that I've been planning to get in the diary for the last probably 10 months, start of the year. So I'm really glad that this has come to fruition. It's really nice to have Ian join us, Luke join us. We're going to talk about equity markets, we're going to talk about SRE, how the teams at Freetrade are met up, event sourcing, and some other bits and pieces. So, do you guys want to give us a quick intro? Ian, you go first.
Sure. I'm Ian. I'm the CTO of Freetrade. Had our app. People like to say how long they've been somewhere. We've had our app out for about 2 years now, so that's the important timeline.
Okay, Luke, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
So yeah, I'm Luke. I'm a senior engineer here at Freetrade. Been here about 20 months now. Enjoying it. I initially joined Freetrade because I invested in the crowdfunding back in 2017. And that's what made me follow Freetrade and see that they had engineering roles.
The summer with the crowdfund must have given everyone so much confidence that you're doing the right thing for your customers, right? It was a record break, I think. I might be wrong, but I remember seeing it. I think it was a record break to maybe 5 or 7 million, or in record time. That must give you confidence, right?
It does. It's definitely good, I think, for the wider team. You know, we're almost kind of up towards 100 employees now, which for a small startup, you know, is a big change from the 12 or so back when we launched the product 2 years ago. So from that point of view, I think it's great. Obviously, I think the senior people in the team have a fairly good feel that that's what we should expect and that's where the company should go. But yeah, it's great to see it underlined. You know, it kind of, there's always a bit of doubt in the back of your head, right? No matter what you're doing, even if things are all moving in the right direction. So that's the kind of underline, the kind of little check next to it to say, yeah, things are moving in the right direction. You're going to continue to grow. So yeah, it was great.
Nice. Luke, how have you seen that impact you and your other colleagues in engineering? What's that growth been like?
So making sure the system can scale for that. So as Ian said, we just jumped we did the migration onto our new platform. We did that migration slowly just to make sure we ironed out any of the issues. But then seeing the growth which the business had and seeing that system scale with it was really good. It meant that we made some correct decisions in that. Of course, there were some performance bottlenecks we found during that growth. And so, you know, you always get those exciting parts of, okay, you got the system, how do you then get even more performance out of it? So you get those interesting problems which come along with that growth. Just sitting still as an engineer, just a system that isn't needing to scale isn't really that interesting to work on. Having that growth and making sure that the system can scale is where the interest lies.
At the start of that migration process, what decisions did you and the team make or take to know what you wanted to achieve come February? Because you said the decisions were correct. What were they?
So I think the serverless approach was helpful. It allowed us to get going quickly. We didn't have to worry about our infrastructure. With our infrastructure scale, that was taken care of by the cloud platform. That was very useful. Also, how we tackled the ledger, which we'll get onto later with the event sourcing, I think really helped. Especially when you need to make investigations, we had the data, we had the information available to us to make sure that the system was behaving, and then how we thought about the numbers. So we didn't just go, oh, we've got 70,000 people on the platform now. It's how is that system going to work with the 100,000, with the 200? How are we going to scale going forward? We might not need to put all those improvements in straight away, but thinking about how we can add to it as the system requires.
Yeah. How are your teams organised? to be able to make those decisions? Is there architecture team? Is it engineers collectively? How's it made up?
Yeah, so we have cross-functional teams, but those cross-functional teams are also focused within particular domains. So it's a little bit like the Spotify model. In fact, I'm sure it's like very, very similar. We call them verticals because I think there's a lot of naming within the Spotify model that people get wrong. Squads and pods kind of get mixed, all this kind of stuff. So wanted to kind of start afresh and make sure we were doing it for the right reasons. But broadly, we have a team, the invest team, that's about trade execution and post-trade behavior. We have a discover team that's about how you find things to invest in the app, and an insights team, a growth team dedicated to growth. So everybody, builds up domain expertise in their area. And at that stage with invest, the invest team had been focused particularly, especially on that domain. So they understood it well. I think that's really important. So they had the domain knowledge. And then something we do from a design point of view is we call RFCs, requests for comment. It's a fairly popular thing in like the open source communities. Broadly speaking, anything that you're going to change within the architecture or infrastructure, you write a doc on it. You invite either everybody or kind of key people from the organization to come and kind of review that doc. And I think that process, as well as a few others around kind of how we hire and how we level people, really made sure that we were making the right choices and they were kind of balanced across the team.
Yeah. What's the culture like? Engineering culture, people culture. If we're talking about decision making and everyone's split into product verticals, what's the culture like, and how do you cultivate that within teams?
Yeah. So we've got our company culture. We've got our 5 values there. I won't list them off, not because I don't know them, but because go to the careers page and check that out. But I think what's interesting from an engineering point of view is how we, from those, kind of focus them around the product engineering team as well. So there's a post I've done on that, but specifically like pragmatism. I think so at company level we've got curiosity and focus. And the way that really plays out within engineering is pragmatism. It's as as engineers, it's very attractive to go and build something because it's easy in kind of double quotes. It might seem easy at the offset, but actually when you come to own and maintain and monitor that in future, things might not play out. So all the choices we make, rather than just build X, Y, Z, we say, well, can we leverage that some other way or take advantage of something we got? So like pragmatism is a really important one within the team. Another one is kind of the idea that we're always learning, which comes from humility at the company level. That applies in all directions, right? It means if you're somebody more junior and you join the team, hopefully you're going to learn some things from the more senior people around you. But it also means, especially in this industry, that if somebody more junior comes in or there's something new, like serverless is a great example, people can be a bit sniffy because same way as they were sniffy about platform as a service kind of 10 years ago. It's new, we're not sure what it is, this has worked for me. That doesn't work. We as a startup are going to get the jump on, the kind of the existing companies by taking advantage of new technology and new approaches. That doesn't mean just jumping on anything without thinking about it, but it does mean being open to new ideas. So that's a really important one in the engineering team. And the other one is not having knowledge silos. So although we have these verticals and they definitely build domain expertise, we're constantly working to de-risk either individuals or anything else where there's a piece of knowledge which could benefit other teams in the organization.
How do you do that de-risk? I've seen you're really active, Luke. You're an active blogger, so I'm sure that gets distributed around the office. But how do you try and de-risk that, Luke, for some of your teammates? and share, especially being remote at the moment. And we're recording this a couple of days before our next lockdown. So how has that impacted some of the communication between your team?
So as Ian said, we have these RFC meetings. So if you want to make a more fundamental change, people will put a 1 or 2 page document together proposing their changes, thinking about the side effects on how to roll it out, and then present that to the wider team, and just get people's comments. Other things we do is a weekly code review with the rest of the team. We'll look through some pull requests. So normally the pull requests will only ever be reviewed by 1 or 2 people. In this fashion, we open up to everyone, and we'll just sit down and discuss that pull request together. So even if it's an area which you're not familiar with, you can either sit back and watch and see what other people are doing, which is great from a junior's perspective. But then it also gives other seniors who haven't had a chance to look at the pull request to maybe put their thoughts into, and sometimes you pick up stuff in those scenarios, better ways to do things, or learning of how someone's done something, that they're really useful.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Just one addition to that as well. I think the sharing is always valuable, but we also try and actively, give people opportunity or move them around in such a way that they get to do something in anger. And it's a good example, actually, Luke. We're going to talk about kind of some of the platform stuff and event sourcing. He was a significant part of the design of that architecture. But when Luke moved outside of the invest team, which he did earlier last year, there was a very high chance that knowledge was going to go with him, and constantly the team would have been reaching out to have that understanding. So, like, to mitigate that, something that we try and do on a regular basis, give somebody the opportunity to deliver something around that architecture, some work, and then have somebody like Luke actually support that. So, Luke is then, say, reviewing PRs or mentoring or whatever it might be for that individual. They're, through exercising the work, going to have a much deeper understanding, I think, than any amount of sharing. I think the sharing is good, but you've got to complement it with actual hands-on.
Event sourcing and volumes of data running through your platform. Talk to us about SRE and platform and what that'll look like for Freetrade.
Yeah, so like most of our specialized teams have a couple of functions, a couple of roles. So it's not whole hog to take somebody's problem and make it go away. So QA, SRE, the data teams, obviously they do great work individually, but it's because we have the cross-functional teams and because we want teams to not have, when it comes to delivery, like logistical problems, and not be depending on other people and be blocked. The specialist teams are really there to first kind of promote best practice. So maybe the SRE team, as it scales, will have more experience on whatever DB management or how to set up a new project in a cloud environment, whatever it might be, and they need to share that best practice, help people understand it. So maybe generally we use Terraform, but let's pretend we're not. The SRE team might be promoting to other teams like, hey, for configuring your resources in the cloud, you should really be using Terraform. So that's the one thing the specialized teams need to do. And then the other bit is to support the delivery of the other teams. So, when it comes to the case of dealing with large volumes of data, maybe, individual work is being done within the team to, so for example, the invest team built something recently to take some of what's stored in our NoSQL store and move it into a kind of semi-cold storage on GCS. And that can be rehydrated if needed. So some of those events we spoke about, not all of them are needed, certainly for that kind of runtime. But if they do become depended on, then they can be kind of rehydrated into the NoSQL store from GCS. So that work was entirely done within the invest team. However, some of how we got there or how we get there in the future would be influenced maybe by the SRE team. So maybe they'd have an understanding of costing, different profiles and different storage methods, what they look like, setting up the infrastructure. Again, it's like a support thing. So, the invest team are like, we need to set up some new GCS buckets. We can do that in Terraform. Do we have a project? Yeah, the SRE team are helping with that, and they've provided some guidance on how to set that up. So really working together, and the SRE team are accelerating what the invest team in this case can do with that solution. And that's how I hope it always works with our specialized teams. As they grow in size, we'll take some of the individuals in those teams and they'll work more directly with particular domain areas. So maybe there's someone working mostly with the invest team because it covers, there's VPNs are more prevalent within that team, whereas they're not in other teams. But they still belong to the SRE team where they're helping develop that general best practice, like I say, with things like Terraform. So that's the model that we have for the specialized teams at Freetrade. And I think it seems to be working well so far.
Okay, so do they promote those practices to each product vertical? They almost parachute in and say, where do you need help? What can we do for you? How do we best serve you? Kind of mindset, and everyone in reverse has to have that, I guess, platform mindset.
Yeah. So, let's take. I mean, our SRE team is pretty small right now. It's one person.
Right.
So, QA is another good example though, as well. With two people in there, and they have actually been doing some ways an SRE function, helping improve our kind of our CI pipelines. But yes, I'd expect that those teams, like that team right now, or that individual right now, has a backlog of things which have come from the needs of the engineering teams. The engineering team, desperately needs some improvements in the CI pipeline. The SRE team can help deliver those changes. But it might be that on approaching them, actually, rather than we currently use Circle, for example, rather than continuing with Circle, we can get some advantage from moving it to cloud build in GCP, or setting up our own instance. And maybe that's the right thing to do. And then that team, Federico, is called, will
shout out to Federico.
We'll spend time educating the teams and to how to do that, why that's the right choice, how to use the new system, etc. Because as we've grown, although when we were 10 people, largely because we're serverless, not much infrastructure overhead. So if we need to tweak the two projects that we have building at the time, an engineer spend a couple of hours doing that, and it's not a big concern. Now we've got 5 or 6 different projects that build, have slightly different concerns. Maybe we want to update all of them with something to make them build more quickly, or whatever it might be. It's harder for engineers to find that time, and their goal is to deliver the product, and so it's not really their focus. So if we have an SRE team, they can enable that. Like here, we're going to, like I say, move the build elsewhere, or we make this single improvement, and we can tell you how to enable it and give you all the documentation for it.
Yeah. Do you have engineering goals that you're aspiring to?
Our main engineering goal has been around operational. Aside from, we have a lot of things that we need to build, and within the different teams, they'll have goals which come from our company level OKRs, objectives and key results. And that will dictate the majority of the work. But if you did that on its own without care and consideration for how the product is being built, you'd obviously end up in a fairly lopsided place. So the main thing we've used to track that has been bug tickets that we've seen in production. But we started to build up, quite a volume of work, which is really about making us move more quickly. So the SRE is a part of an answer to that. But in addition, it's formalizing and getting some processes around how we take, let's say the particular approaches we're taking to mobile development. Maybe let's say, how we use principal engineers in the company who have kind of a 5% time dedicated to bringing that forward. How they do that, and how we help bring that in line across multiple teams. So right now we have, I think it's a monthly meeting that has principals and managers from across the company, and we use that to formalize things like, okay, how are we going to migrate from X to Y? So our cloud functions were backed by Firebase originally. They're now migrating to what we call a mono repo, which is this monolithic, instead of mono repos, which is used to build like standard cloud functions and is deployed by Terraform. And that program of work, needs some sponsorship and a time availability. So that's what we've used.
What's making you do that?
A few things, but we deploy about 300 or so functions per project. Firebase is not really designed for that. Also, Firebase is like, although there are separate cloud functions, it's a bit like deploying a monolithic code base because it all gets deployed in one go. It all, encourages you to build that function based on a monolithic piece of code, which means from a bundle point of view, like the individual function that gets uploaded, it actually contains the code for the entire code base. So the new model that we have is split up into packages. Each function only builds in the dependencies it needs. So some of them are much smaller. It only deploys the ones that have changed. So of those 300 functions, maybe only 30 of them get deployed. And because they're smaller, it tackles one of the biggest problems with serverless cloud functions, at least, which is that cold start time. So they can start much more quickly. So there's a few drivers behind that.
Yeah, Luke, how easy is it to adopt, pick up, and accelerate serverless within teams or around teammates? Or were you a serverless user before Freetrade?
No, I'd never touched serverless before, so it was a learning jump. Some things which stand out with serverless versus non-serverless is with serverless, Google can come along and just kill your function at any point in time. So you have to start thinking about, how do I really build a resilient piece of code? You kind of just take that for granted when you own the server. The chances of that application just disappearing halfway through isn't really there, although it is. But with serverless, it will happen. If you don't think about it, you'll end up with a function being killed and then being restarted. And so you have to think about the idempotency and how do I handle my business, my function code running a second time? Do I want all the same code to then execute? So it makes you think about how to make resilient software, which you should be thinking anyway. You just potentially don't, because you take
laziness,
certain things for granted. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I think in this show we've really understood what embodies a free trade team. I think we've got a good feeling for the culture. Luke, you've done a splendid job on talking to us about event sourcing. Thank you, and as well, Ian, on SRE and platform. Talk to us a little bit about some of the people that you're looking to bring into the business and maybe the goal of the business. Let's just roll the clock forward a year. What sort of teammates do you think you're looking for, Luke? And then you can talk to us about the vision, Ian.
Okay. So something we look for are engineers who are willing to work across the whole stack. So we don't. So my background is back end with a bit of HTML, web development, and that kind of front end. But we look for people who are willing to work both on mobile and back end, rather than just pigeonholed. It's not to say that you have to have experience in mobile. Before I joined, I'd never touched mobile besides a Windows mobile app back in 2002. But this year I've done a lot of iOS and Android development. So we look for people who are willing to work on across. It's not to say that you'll always be doing it, but there'll always be people there to help assist you when you do it. We just find that gives you a more rounded focused on what you're developing, because you're kind of working along the whole user journey, from both how the user will see it in the app to how it behaves in the back.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, and what sort of mindset shift is that? There's got to be one. But yeah, that's a good phraseology. Okay, interesting. And you're happy to look at any engineers from any tech background?
Yeah. So my background's .NET, C Sharp, bit of Ruby, tiny bit of Go in my personal time. But our stack at Freetrade, TypeScript, some Python, Swift, and Kotlin on the mobile clients. So we don't hire people specifically with languages. We would look for people who've got experience, know how to apply their experience to other languages, and are willing to learn to work across different stacks and different frameworks.
How do you guys interview for that? I'm curious. Do you ask people to build an application the best they can? Is it a standard hacker rank?
So we have a couple of stages. We've got some technical questions, some basic code exercises, and then it goes on to more detailed coding exercises. We don't require people to write it in any specific language. So we've had people use Go, C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, um, Kotlin, Swift. People write whatever they're most comfortable in.
Nice. Okay. Um, and hypothetically, Ian, where would these engineers come into the vision of what you're trying to build, and how many people are you looking for?
I think we're always looking for more people than we can hire. So I don't think I think if we get too many people, that's not a problem that I'm worried about. The real challenge is finding people at the right level. We follow the kind of bar raising mindset. So everybody that we hire is making the team better. Ultimately, they're kind of in the middle or better than that the rest of the team. So constantly. That means Hugh, who's an incredibly talented engineer, has built a big part of our platform that we currently have, is still hopefully going to learn from our new hires, right? And everyone will continue to get better as a team. I think what I would like for us long term is that people look to Freetrade as somewhere to go and become better at software engineering. There are a lot of good kind of hardworking teams out there, but we want to be the best. We want to look the same way that Amazon, Google, etc. do. Long term, we want people to say, I want to work at Freetrade because I want to become a better engineer than necessarily the other things, right? However, I do think, given the other things at this stage, we look kind of like nobody else in London right now. I think there are a few places that have the same kind of growth mindset that are doing well, that have a product. There's a few kind of B2B companies, but personally, if you're like me and you're motivated by working on a product that's in and of itself nice, something you might use and want to share with other people, there are very few companies like that and on our size where you can still have an impact as well. So I think there's an amazing opportunity there. But it's still hard for us to find those people because, we're looking for the top 1%. So it's hard to find them, and it's a long process. The interview process, Luke mentions a few stages, but I think it's worth it for us, and hopefully worth it for the candidate as well.
Okay, you're finding the 1%. How can they find you? What's the best way?
Freetrade.io/careers. We've got roles on there right now, or you can just connect with me on LinkedIn as well.